Good morning, everyone. I am Jennifer Anju Grossman. I was born in peak Jennifer year, so I go by my nickname, Jag. I run the Atlas Society. We are the leading nonprofit introducing young people to the ideas of Ayn Rand. And I'm so excited to be here, but first I've got some good news and some bad news. The good news is that AmericaFest is officially sold out. The bad news is that Katie Hobbs is demanding a recount. But coming from California, it's great to be in a state that Republicans can always count on. You know, maybe I'll rephrase that. Yeah. Now, regardless, I always love showing up to speak at a Turning Point event. You guys always give me such a warm reception. I feel as welcome as a homeless guy with a hammer knocking on Paul Pelosi's door at 3 a.m. Now, but unlike the guy in his underwear, I actually chose my outfit, this dress, with care. And I almost didn't get to wear it because on Saturday I landed at the airport. I went to baggage claim and there was this bald guy in an evening gown and heels trying to steal my luggage. Is Sam Brinton here?
He's in jail.
Okay, you know, you can clap for that. Because it's my nightmare to show up at an event like this and Sam Brinton and I are wearing the same dress. No. That would be awkward. So today is a special day for me and my family. It is the second day of Hanukkah, or or as Kanye West calls it, Monday. You know, I almost feel sorry for Kanye West. One day you're an Adidas billionaire, and the next day you can't even get hired at Foot Locker. Like, something happened to his mind. You know, maybe Kim Kardashian actually did screw his brains out. So their holiday family gathering is probably a bit awkward, and on a much minor scale, I can relate to awkward family gatherings, being the only Republican in a family of Jewish Democrats. So in addition to celebrating Hanukkah this week, my parents are still sitting Shiva for Hillary Clinton's 2016 campaign. So as you can imagine, I'm quite the disappointment. But as dismayed as my parents are by my shift to the right, they're baffled by their own party's shift to the hard left. They're trying to figure out how their party of FDR and JFK became the party of AOC and BLM and CRT. Part of what is driving that shift to the left is young people's present company accepted, infatuation with socialism. And I hardly need to tell you young people here about the growing ranks of socialists on campus. You are dealing with it every day. So the data actually backs me up. A YouGov survey of young millennials and Gen Z found that less than 50% had a positive view of capitalism. And 70% said that they would be somewhat or extremely likely to vote for a socialist candidate. So any guess, now that is as disturbing as it comes, but personally, even more disturbing is that this mind virus of socialism is infecting even young Republicans. 3 years ago, 81% professed a positive view of capitalism. Today, it's around just 2/3, with 30% of young Republicans professing a negative view of capitalism. So, given that we have a lot of young people in the audience, what do you think? What are the reasons that are driving this? What's causing it?
Public schools.
Public schools. That's a good answer.
Social media indoctrination.
Excellent. Another really good answer.
Many teachers blame capitalism for poverty.
Teachers blaming capitalism for poverty.
Misplaced compassion.
Misplaced compassion. Exactly. How about some compassion for the producers?
The curriculum,
The curriculum. Excellent. Excellent.
lack of religion,
Possibly. Yeah.
lack of life experience.
Okay, there we go. Okay. Lack of life experience. So the reason that I titled my remarks, "The Real Reason Kids Love Socialism," is that I agree with all of your answers, but I think that there is a more fundamental phenomenon driving this fatal attraction. And it's important to understand, because even if you could wave a magic wand and get rid of the curriculum and end government schools, return, as Ayn Rand said, to a separation of, schools and state, and get rid of social media, I think you still would not have gotten to the deeper source of this socialist infection, because it's an infection that is festering not primarily on an intellectual level, but on an emotional, psychological, and spiritual level. So, the real reason kids love socialism, it's a 4-letter word: fear. Fear. What are kids afraid of? Well, as this young lady pointed out, independence. Why would they be afraid of independence? Because on some fundamental level, they believe they lack the wherewithal to make their way in the world, to earn a living, to compete in the marketplace, and to get ahead in life. Granted, there is a rational aspect to this fear. Inflation is out of control, layoffs are looming, we've got Biden as the president, and consumer confidence is at an all-time low. So, that's real, that's rational. But while young people rationally fear a great recession, their deeper dread is caused by something that I will call the Great Regression. Now, over Thanksgiving, my parents, in between taking breaks of criticizing me for my politics, were reminiscing, and they pointed out that how much I hated being a kid and what a desperate hurry I was in to become an adult, whether it was the clothes I wore, or the friends I chose, or the habits I adopted, or the attitudes I affected. My parents rightly complained that I was trying to grow up too fast. By contrast, their grandchildren belong to a generation that, if anything, is growing up too slowly. According to a recent study published in the journal Child Development, surveys of over 8 million kids aged 13 to 19 found that over the last 4 decades, teenagers became much less likely to try adult activities. Now, some of that is positive, right? Less underage drinking and promiscuity. But the surveys found that the teens were also far less likely to work, to date, to drive, or even to go out. The roots of this regression go back to the 80s and 90s, reacting to sensationalized stories of child abductions and other things. Parents changed. They became less likely to let their kids walk to school or, even play outside unsupervised. A great sort of culture of safetyism was taking shape. Schools removing dangerous play structures from the playgrounds, or even peanut butter sandwiches from the classrooms. So overprotected kids growing up in the late 90s and after not only got the message that the world they were living in was a very dangerous place. In many cases, they were actually prevented and shielded from doing things on their own, from taking risks, from getting into scrapes, from making mistakes and overcoming them. And in the process, they were deprived of an opportunity to gain a sense of resilience and agency. Greg Lukianoff and Jonathan Haidt documented this process in The Coddling of the American Mind, and they link it to a generation that showed up on campus around 2013, 2014, that was markedly different than the ones that came before. Far more fearful, far more anxious, and far more ready to demand things like speech codes or safe spaces. Now, if a young person fears being traumatized by hearing opinions that they don't like, imagine the terror that they must feel about the prospect of going on a job interview or sitting through a performance review, much less the roller coaster of going out and starting their own business. It's no wonder that young people would prefer the fantasy of a socialist utopia in which they are simply handed a job, or even better, a guaranteed income. On top of that, the constant bombardment of messaging on climate change and, of course, COVID, has needlessly terrified too many young people into believing that they are constantly in deathly danger. So is it really any surprise that young people walking around in a panic that they may not survive a cold or the next heat wave might also be afraid of the rigors of the free market? You can see the great regression in the antics of young climate activists, dumping milk onto the floor, throwing food onto the walls, sitting on the floor and refusing to move, even demanding that someone bring them their potty. Now, such displays also demonstrate a desperate desire for social and moral significance. And today, the easiest route to social and moral significance is to adopt an identity of victimhood. Israeli psychologist Sam Vaknin, who I'm going to be interviewing on my show in 2 weeks, had this to say: victimhood endows their life with meaning. It makes sense of the world. Victimhood is an organizing principle. Well, victimhood is also an organizing principle for what? Failures. Another way to say that is socialism, right? It divides the world into oppressors and the oppressed. And it presents a paradigm in which capitalism is not viewed as an avenue for individual advancement, but as an instrument of exploitation. Now, decades before this great regression started to gather steam, Ayn Rand made the connection between young people's dread of independence and collectivism. She said, observe young people's dread of independence and their desperate desire to belong to any group, to any clique, to any gang. They are ready to be taken over by any guru, witch doctor, or dictator. Now, when we have 70% of young people, your peers, not you, who are saying that they are ready to vote for, likely to vote for a socialist candidate, they're not just ready for dictatorship, they are asking for it. And if they get their wish, then welcome to the dystopia that Ayn Rand dramatized in Atlas Shrugged. Now, when Ayn Rand was asked if Atlas Shrugged was a prophecy, she said, no, Atlas Shrugged is not a prophecy of our unavoidable destruction. It is rather a manifesto of man's power to avoid it if we choose to change our course. So, how do we choose to change our course? Well, the answer is not politically correct. It is not PC. It is P and C, philosophy and courage. They say that politics is downstream from culture, and the Great Regression that I earlier outlined illustrates just that. Media scares leading to parenting changes, leading to less self-confident young people pining for the security that they mistakenly believe that socialism will offer them. But if politics is downstream from culture, what is culture downstream from? Philosophy. It's the values, it's the ethics, it's the morality of a society that determine its culture. So if you want to fight socialism, you need to equip yourself to make the case for capitalism in moral terms, not just in economic terms. Ayn Rand warned us that capitalism cannot survive without a moral base. On the basis of the altruist morality, capitalism was damned from the start. Now, capitalism may have been damned, but it needn't be doomed. And if we are going to defend it properly, then we need to go beyond making the case that that capitalism is practically superior to socialism, and also make the case that it is morally superior to socialism as the only system that protects not only our right to defend our lives, but our right to improve our lives by working, by trading, by innovating, and by profiting from our productivity. We need to stop pretending that young socialists are merely misguided young idealists and call out their darker motives, their envy, their entitlement, their victimhood, and their greed, which Ayn Rand described as the desire for the unearned. If you ever wondered why, of anybody, Ayn Rand inspires the most unhinged hatred on the left, it is precisely because she challenged the left on their moral high ground. So that's the P, the philosophy. What about the C, the courage? Well, they say that fear is infectious, but so is courage. You can build your own. You can raise your hand in class to state an unpopular opinion. You can start a side gig at college. You can ask, or maybe you can even leave college altogether. You can ask the unattainable girl out. Girls, don't ask guys out. We can talk about that in the Q&A. And when you start a family, you can avoid repeating the mistakes of your parents' generation. You can protect your children by removing them from the dangers of the government school system. But you should also release them and even encourage them to go out, to do things on their own, to make mistakes, and to recover from them and gain that sense of agency. Will that frighten you? Yes. But in doing so, you will be giving your children a sense of self-confidence and resilience that capitalism requires and rewards. And in demonstrating personal courage, unfortunately, you will be seen as sinister by some. But you will also inspire and intrigue and encourage others to boldness, right? We've all experienced that. Will you still feel panicked? Will you still sometimes feel nervous and afraid? You will. But you can repeat to yourself a favorite mantra of mine, which is from Frank Herbert's Dune. I must not fear. Fear is the mind killer. Fear is the little death that brings total obliteration. I will face my fear. I will let it pass over me and through me. And when it has gone past, I will turn the inner eye to see its path. And where fear has gone, there will be nothing. Only I will remain. With courage and a moral defense of capitalism, you will not only remain, you will remain free. And you will replace the great regression with the great succession as you take your rightful place as America's future leaders, entrepreneurs, parents, and patriots, and in so doing, restore America as a bastion of free market capitalism and as a beacon of liberty to inspire the world. Thank you. All right, now's your time for boldness. Ask some really tough questions.
So I'm homeschooled. How do you recommend fighting capitalism where I'm at?
So I'm homeschooled, and all of my friends also have conservative values. How do you recommend fighting socialism in the kind of community I have?
Well, that is a great question. Work with us at the Atlas Society. So I didn't really talk a bit about what we do at the beginning, but everything that we do is to try and equip young people for this fight. And whether that is our graphic novels, which you can work with us to get into local libraries, organize a brigade to put them in the little libraries in your neighborhood, find young people to come to our summer conference in Nashville this summer, have them join our seminars. We've got an amazing faculty of professors from fields of economics and philosophy. And, you know, I think the other thing is just also to uplift examples. Sometimes the most powerful example in terms of fighting socialism is just to put a spotlight on successful entrepreneurs. Also encourage young people to avoid going to college and to maybe join up with my friends over at Praxis, where they can hook you up with apprenticeships so that you avoid the cost and the humiliation and danger of going to intellectual danger of going to college and find ways to start building your own portfolio so that you can get that experience that is going to make you much less and make your peers much less vulnerable to the socialist pressures around them.
What is the Randian perspective on affirmative action and so-called reverse discrimination? How can you square away free market capitalism with hiring based on quotas?
Great question. So Ayn Rand called for a complete separation of economy and state for the same reasons and in the same way that we have separation of church and state. So she believed that the government had essentially one basic function, which was to protect individual rights, and that all individuals must be treated equally before the law. And clearly, affirmative action is one in which they are not being treated equally before the law. And we've done a lot of videos on that, including an animated video we just did, My Name is Critical Race Theory. So, in a free market, if people decide, hey, we're only going to, hire men, or we're an airline, we're only going to hire, pretty stewardesses that are able to, handle the customers, then that's fine. But, if they decide to discriminate, they will have to deal with the consequences of doing that, right? So let's say on a dark side that you've got somebody that is a racist, and they say, I'm going to hire an accounting, I'm going to start an accounting firm, and I'm not going to hire any Jews. Well, good luck with that, or I'm going to start a basketball team, and I'm not going to hire any blacks. Okay, we'll see how the market treats you. But, in terms of the government, I mean, it's unconstitutional. And fortunately, we have a good Supreme Court now in place, and that they're going to be hearing some of these cases, and we're going to make some progress. But I talked before about the prospects of dictatorship. And we've got kind of a soft, befuddled dictator in the presidency right now. Imagine if we actually have an outright one who is going to say, oh, Supreme Court, we'll just pack that. Or we'll just dox everybody and maybe, we'll get rid of a few pesky Supreme Court justices that way. So, yeah.
So culture and philosophy are two really difficult things to overcome in terms of mindset. People have their heels dug in, just like we can have our heels dug in, right? They're just kind of tunnel vision. And so, while I appreciate the websites we can go to and the things that we can listen to, I think for us that are kind of surrounded by that mentality, right? You can't talk about the Constitution because it's terrible and it was written by racists, and you can't talk about religion because they don't believe in God. And so I'm just wondering, even in your own family, right, how do you keep those relationships in a loving, positive place? But also, sorry, I'm joking on this question.
It sounds like it's personal to you. Yeah, well, I hear you. Yeah, I hear you. I know, because it really, people are like in a cult at this point. And you can see what Ayn Rand talked about, because when she was talking about it 4 decades ago, and she was talking about what the source of the dread of independence was, she was talking about it in philosophical terms, which was the abandonment of reason. And reason, of course, is our only tool of survival. And if you abandon that, then you've dismantled your own kind of interface with the world. and you're definitely going to be terrified. But in terms of like with my own family, you know, I adore my parents, and I love my parents, and I believe in the value of justice, and the value of justice means to me that I look at all of the wonderful things that they have done for me and continue to do for me, and you know, they outweigh some of the fact that they're voting for people that are destroying the country, which is disturbing. But yeah, so I try to keep things in perspective. But you know, I also just find that we need to. I always say, and I think this is really important for objectivists, 'cause sometimes they just get like so zero focused on one little thing, that you can't be objective if you don't have perspective. So sometimes also just kind of stepping back and remembering that, you know, politics is important, but it's not the only thing in life. There are relationships, and there is beauty, and there is art. And we, you know, also don't set ourselves up to think that we, as any particular individual in any particular place, you know, we're carrying the burden of making all of this happen and carrying that burden on our shoulders. You know, Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged was about shrugging when the burden has become impossible. So I would say that, but then just, you know, doing what you're doing, and this is why we come to AmericaFest, and this is why we go to Turning Point conferences and Young Americans for Liberty conferences, and we go to Atlas Society Gala, is because we need to take care of ourselves, and we need to surround ourselves with people that share our values and gain strength, and then go back out there and do it again. I'm powerless to the microphone lady.
So I run a Turning Point chapter in college, and I always have socialists come up to me and talk to me, and you know, I always give them the examples of all the places that socialism failed and whatnot, and the most common thing I get is, oh, well, it just hasn't been implemented correctly. What is the best response to that?
Well, that's why, and I mean, this is a perfect example of that, because my criticism of libertarians and conservatives is that when we just keep making the case for capitalism in terms of history and in terms of math, you're going to get, well, it wasn't tried on planet, you know, Zulu or something. So, so you need to, they're not willing to talk in terms of facts and logic, okay? So we established that. So I would actually just switch it up, change it up, and as I mentioned in my remarks, try to make the case for capitalism in moral terms and equip yourself. Go and read Ayn Rand's Capitalism, the Unknown Ideal, and get involved with the Atlas Society. Ask Richard Salzman, who's an economist from Duke, on our faculty, to speak to your students. We'll send him, okay? Give him a training. We'll gameplay it, you know, we'll role play it, and we'll get it done. But you're just wasting your breath when you're trying to make the case in economic and historical terms, because these are not people that are willing to be dealing with facts. And I think also tying into my friend's question before, you need to make your choices. Remember, this is what Ayn Rand's philosophy of objectivism will give you. It will give you the permission and the imperative to put yourself first and to protect yourself. And that means to not sacrifice yourself to others. And that means, you know, there are people that they are lost for now. And they're lost to us for now. And maybe someday they will come back around and they'll be ready to have a rational discussion. But just to continue, as I have the sense that you're already doing, modeling these discussions, because it's the kooky person, right, who's like spouting the dogma, but it's the other people that are kind of hanging on the edges, and they're looking at this conversation and they're like, well, this person's crazy and mean and this person's reasonable, and like, I would be totally terrified doing what he's doing, but he's doing it. So, I mean, you know, maybe I'm going to rethink this.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to make a statement that I'm very, very touched to see all the young people here. You guys are the future, and thank you so much for being here. And my question is that we came from a communist country. We know what communism, socialism is like, so I don't know if you have had any segment talking about people sharing those kind of stories to the young people so that they know what to the experience that we experience. And that's why I'm just so happy and so touched to see the young people here.
Yeah, well, what you said touched me because, you know, Ayn Rand is you. She had the same story. She fled the Soviet Union, you know, after seeing the Bolsheviks there take over her father's business and take over their home and destroy the country. And she fled to the United States, and then she saw that the people here in the United States were glorifying and celebrating communism. And, you know, her head was going to explode, just like I get a sense yours is. And that's what moved her to action. But I do think that hearing the young voices of people that have fled from communism is important, and we do that at Atlas Society, and that is another way, you know, if you're on campus, to get these young voices, because maybe they won't hear it from you because they don't trust you, but maybe they will at least be moved by someone who's saying, no, I was there, it said communism, this is what they said. And at the Atlas Society, one of the things I've been most excited about in the past 2 years is our international expansion. Believe it or not, one of our biggest markets is Venezuela. I didn't know that there was anybody left in Venezuela, but you know, we've done videos, My Name is Venezuela. We've started a Spanish sister organization, Sociedad Atlas, and the young people that staff it are from, you know, Venezuela and other countries like that. So that's a really important piece of the struggle. So check it out. Check out some of the stuff that we have on that. Go ahead and just.
Yeah, I don't have a microphone, but what do you think she would think of the rise of the technocracy now? Nobody at this conference yet has talked about the control of money. Mm-hmm. And when we talk about protecting ourselves, and I think about what's happening to the dollar, I'm not really hearing any great solutions except for save silver and gold.
Yeah, well, I mean, I hear you there, and Ayn Rand had a very famous speech about money in Atlas Shrugged, Francisco's money speech. And I do think that those fears are merited because what we saw during the lockdowns was that there's this beginning of a social credit score which can be used, as they did in Canada, to freeze the accounts, not just of the Canadian truckers, but also anybody who, you know, gave them $50. So this will be, you know, I got 2 minutes. This will be a bit controversial, but I am a believer in Bitcoin. It's hard to say right now because it's in a really terrible bear market, and it's really volatile. But you know, it's been in similar bear markets, and it's just completely different than these other S-coins and crypto out there, because it actually is an algorithm that can't be changed. So even though it's not a very practical solution right now, I do think that those are kinds of practical solutions. Absolutely decentralized solutions that nobody can go in to Bitcoin and change it, you know. But we actually just recently honored Michael Saylor at our gala last fall, and we're going to be honoring Ricardo Salinas. He's the third richest man in Mexico at our gala next October in Miami, and both of them are two of the biggest Bitcoin holders, and Saylor in particular makes the connection between Galt's Gulch and Satoshis.
We're going to take one more question.
Yeah.
Hi, Jennifer. Thank you for being here. I'm from California, and as a city that was known nationally for having one of the best school systems in the country, recently the education system has been deteriorating. And I know homeschooling has been a direction for many conservatives to take, but personally I believe I understand their viewpoint, but from my perspective, I believe that we should still fight back to take our schools. Because now, of course, there are advantages and disadvantages for both homeschooling and being in school, but the atmosphere of being in school, on a campus, with peers, infrastructure, resources, that's what I believe. Now, aside for parents and concerned people running for school boards, what do you recommend we should do, for example, as students, as young people, to take back our schools?
Well, I would say this. I think that, just like Adam Smith said that the brilliance of the free market was in the diversification of labor and the specialization. So I do think that we need different people doing different things. And that means some are going to run for school board, and some are going to show up at the school board, and they're going to complain. And then others are going to be homeschooling, or they're going to be doing other things. I think there's been so much, I wouldn't, your question almost sort of seems like you're describing the homeschooling of, 2010 rather than the homeschooling of 2022, because, in the past 3 years, so much has changed. There's so much entrepreneurial activity going on in schools. There are hybrid schools, there are micro schools, so there's a lot going on. And if you are, maybe you're in a good public school system, but either way, if your kids are in public school, get them tutors and make sure that you are also teaching them on your own. So I'm over my limit, so thanks everyone.